Hello, and welcome to Broads and Books. I'm Erin.
And I'm Amy. And this is episode number 87, Ice, Ice, Baby. God, that feels weird just to say.
I know. Immediately, don't you just think of like the terrible hair fade?
Yeah. Mr. Vanilla Ice. Mr. Ice? Vanilla, his first name?
Vanilla.
Yeah.
Last name Ice, I think is how he would like to be referred to.
Maybe we should also talk about why we chose this atrocious song.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I really wanted to go with a theme of like cringy picks, like
Yes.
moments that are just, ooh, like they give you that feeling. Like I'm not going to stop watching, but I should. And I want you to stop for yourself, but you're not going to. And I said, we need a really cringy song.
Yeah.
And Amy said, what's more cringy than Ice Ice Baby? And I have to agree.
I mean, it's kind of, especially if you're around the age that we were
Yes.
when that came out. Like, even liking the song, I think we even knew this is not a good song, objectively.
No. I mean, I know all the words.
I know all the words.
I saw him in concert when he came to the fair a few years ago with the I Love 90s tour.
Uh-huh.
And watching Vanilla Ice spray the audience with water instead of like champagne, you know, I think
just
generally
sad.
it was an out-of-body experience. I'm not going to
Yeah.
lie. It was cringy and also sort of delightful in like a
Yeah.
weird, like the world coming full circle kind of way. Yeah.
You know, just to be clear, we're talking about books and picks that we actually like, but
Yes, they contain cringy
of
moments.
ultimate
Yes,
cringe.
absolutely. Yes.
Because we don't talk about books we don't like,
No.
but these just have some really wonderful cringe-worthy.
Which is excellent
moments.
writing. To elicit
Yeah.
that feeling in a reader,
Yes.
that's some stellar writing. So what do you think makes something cringeworthy?
Man, this is kind of hard to pin down.
It is.
But I think there's an embarrassment factor where you're embarrassed for someone that isn't embarrassed themselves.
Yes.
Do you think?
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Like they're doing something
yes.
extremely like not cool, or like, I don't know if I want to go offensive, but they're just like doing something that I should know they probably shouldn't do. And we're embarrassed for them, but they don't have the self-reflection enough to recognize like, oh,
Yes.
I should be embarrassed in this moment.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. That's perfect. I think that's a perfect way to describe it. To say, yeah, that it's that innate feeling that you have, like, please stop.
Yes.
But you know it's not going to stop.
And I think of it mostly in like a lot of like sitcoms or like, you know, movies where we see it happening.
Reality
where the character,
TVs,
yes,
like,
where we
big cringy.
see the character like, what are you doing? Why are you saying that? Why are you proceeding with this
Why?
harebrained idea?
Terrible.
And they proceed.
And I don't know about you, but when I'm reading these scenes sometimes in a book, I'll be like, ugh, out loud. You know, you get that like gut.
I have to fight the tendency to just skim over it because I get like so uncomfortable.
Yeah. It feels too much.
Too much.
Too much to go with.
Yeah. You know, I think that we both probably have a lot of cringy moments.
Yeah.
Moments maybe where we ourselves were embarrassed, or we
Yes.
didn't quite know we should be embarrassed.
Yes.
Or however you want to define it. What's a cringy moment for you from your childhood?
Well, I think that's why your definition was perfect, because I remember, which I think maybe most people do as a child, but have that like sense of infallibility. Like you think no matter what, it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And I, for whatever reason, thought that I was destined to be on stage. And so I decided to try out.
Oh, no.
I think it was the community theater.
Oh, God.
Was putting on like a Sound of Music production.
Erin, no.
And you had to go early to the grade school because they needed younger kids in it, right? With the adults. And they were going to audition us. And I convinced my parents to take me early with literally, let's bear in mind, I have no musical training.
And how old are you at this point?
Oh, I was still in elementary school because it was at the same building. Third, fourth grade, maybe.
Okay,
maybe
so 8,
young.
9,
Yeah.
somewhere around there. Okay.
But I had no idea. Wasn't taking voice lessons. Okay. I don't even know that I was in piano yet. I wasn't doing anything to prepare myself. I'd never been in a show. I mean,
But you thought you were destined for community center.
I thought
stardom.
I am a shoo-in to be one of these Von Trapp children. Clearly, I am meant to do this because I don't know if you saw Sound of Music, but clearly there was a kid with glasses and no coordination.
Yeah.
That was a big part of the musical,
that was
as I
you.
remember.
Yeah.
No. So I went, and almost immediately, I kind of should have had the sense, like, I'm out of my depth here. Like, these people look like they prepared. I got the sheets when I got here. I didn't think to get them ahead of time. I am not prepared for speaking or singing or dancing, but I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it without any hesitation. And I auditioned. Spoiler alert. I did not make my community theater debut. And when I look back now, I think that was so cringy.
But at the same moment, I almost want to hug your younger self for having the self-confidence to be like, I am a freaking star. And I'm going to show everyone. Even if there was nothing backing it up, you had some confidence.
Okay, I could give that. But I do think it brings up another point of cringeworthy moments, too, is that I do think there's that flicker of recognition in yourself where you go, this isn't right, but I'm too far in. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to put 2 feet forward.
I'm do it.
Because I imagine that in a lot of situations, the characters, maybe sometimes they realize after the fact, or you see that in reality TV, like it flickers on their face, like they know they shouldn't be doing this, but they just, you're too far in. You're too far in.
And that's a great point, because that look of recognition, like if we see that on a show or something, I'm like, oh God, abort, and I need to get out of here. I can't witness this.
Yes. Yeah, you get sweaty, and I get like, oh.
Do you remember like being on stage and thinking like, did you ever have a moment of like, oh no?
Yeah, I mean, it was like right before. And
no.
To be clear, the audition wasn't even, it was like in the elementary school music room, because it was just for that. But there was adults there that were auditioning, because they auditioning the children that they wanted obviously to work with. When I look back, I also think now, with my lens, there's a little bit of cringe for those adults. Like, you were taking it so serious. That you went to the elementary school and were having them audition for this Sound of Music
That's
production.
a good point. Let's put the cringe on them.
Yeah.
You were 8 or 9 years old with some damn confidence.
Yes.
And these adults.
Nothing in my life yet had told me that you need to be more aware of your skills before you do things.
See, I like to think that you were just beaten down by the world. But before that, you had this moment where you're like, no, I am a bright shooting star.
I'm a something star, and I'm doing this. I know. I don't know what I imagined or how I imagined it going, but I know that I went with no prep. I didn't even think about prepping. I was just like, show up, and here I am.
You know, this is a theme, because I remember when you said you challenged a boy to a race.
Oh, yeah.
To prove that
That's
women,
another cringy moment.
where you were just like, I don't need to prep. It's fine. And you just show up and you're like, oh no, this was a bad decision.
There is a theme in my life of that. Or I'm shooting baskets in gym for no reason, and I get in a free throw contest with no preparation. Didn't even know I was entering in a contest when I was shooting the original baskets.
See, I like to think too, you've learned from that, because now you over prepare.
Yeah,
like we both
I do.
We are very, very like, checklists and everything.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because we had those moments of like, oh no.
Mm-hmm. I will say and it's a part of myself that I'm okay with now. There is a part of me that sometimes uses, like, I'll boost myself up with confidence that I don't think I actually have, just to like get through. Like, I can do this. It's fine. I got this.
Yeah.
I got this.
Yeah.
I can do this.
For sure.
I can for sure do this. And even though in the back of my head, like the owl with the glasses that's like wise is like, oh, no, you can't. Nope.
Is it the same owl that did the Tootsie Pops?
Well, yeah, that's the wise old owl. How
Yeah.
many licks? And he's like, how many times, Aaron? How many times?
Did you learn nothing from Tootsie Pops, Aaron?
You don't know anything. You are ill prepared.
I like having like the voice of a wise owl in our heads.
Well, I don't like the angel demon thing, the
No.
shoulder thing. No.
Ew.
Mine's just a wise old owl.
Wise old owl.
Sometimes I listen. Sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
But he stays at the same volume and he doesn't interject. He just says, look,
I'm just going to tell you this.
Not your
and
best
you
move.
do what you will with it. Yeah.
it's not going to end well, but
Yeah.
I'm here. So, and
Does
I'm
that
a
wise
wise old
owl-
owl.
Does that wise old owl have a name? Like he needs a name. Or maybe he doesn't need a name. Maybe he's just unnameable. He's just the
Yeah,
owl.
I think he's just like a force, like just like a presence. He's just the wise old owl presence that's
it's
there.
funny that you have an owl in your head, because I have an owl in my yard. Like in the last week.
Did he get out of my head?
He did. At night I've been hearing owl hoots, and I'm like, I have a legit owl out there. I don't own the owl. I'm not feeding the owl, just so we're clear.
Okay, that was my follow-up question.
No.
Okay.
The owl is being an owl. The owl
if
is
I came
doing
in
his
someday
thing.
and you have the full leather glove on in your house and you have an owl on your arm,
I mean, that's going to be amazing if I do.
it's going to be time for a break. I'm just going to say I'm going to have to go on a hiatus for a little bit.
Amy needs a mental health
Because
rehab
as much as my wise old owl, they're also super mean. So
they are.
I would
they're
worry
vicious.
about you.
Yeah.
If you had the big glove and were just walking around with an owl.
I
think
mean,
you would have to have the leather face thing too.
I would have to have full body armor.
Oh, wait. Do they put that leather thing on the owl, don't they? So the owl can't see?
Yes, they do, but I would need one too.
I'm putting it on you. How is that helpful? You can't see the owl coming.
No, I'm picturing like medieval armor just all over.
I went with the owl hat on you accidentally. What? Now you can't even see before your eyes are going to be pecked out. Which I guess maybe is better. I don't know.
Maybe what I'm actually hearing is my own internal owl that is is like saying like, "Oh, you've been ignoring me too long, so I'm gonna pretend to be an outside owl." And really,
that could be. Maybe your inside owl is very complex and knows that it needs to trick you.
Yeah.
Maybe my inside owl is just lazy. He's just in there and he's like, listen, you don't need to do that. And then he just goes back to sleep. This is a gig. I got her. I've been doing this a long time and she doesn't listen. So, yeah.
Do you think we all have inside owls?
I think so. I think mine's just drinking Mai Tais and saying what ifs.
Your owl's taking a break.
When's Bachelor in Paradise start? I don't really want to be watching this lady. Oh, okay. Boy. So that was what something that happened when I was younger. Yeah. That was very cringy.
Yeah.
Was there something when you were younger that you thought was like the bee's knees that now is like cringeworthy? You look back and go, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I took this question as like a who.
Oh.
And I immediately thought of Kirk Cameron because he was the bee's knees in the 80s, gracing all the Tiger Beat insides and out. Mm-hmm. And now he is the epitome of cringe. He went full on Christian conspiracy, far right Looney Tunes. He was doing all the Left Behind movies for a while. Mm-hmm. Anytime he's speaking on social media is a bad time. It's not good.
Yeah. Yeah, he really took that
in
a different
direction. He really
direction.
took it bad.
I don't know if anyone saw that coming. Maybe people that worked with him and knew him, but
we just saw him as
fans.
We just saw him as a cute, harmless teenage boy to put our crush upon. Mm-hmm. And
you know what though?
What?
Is that not a good life lesson? Cute, harmless teenage boy.
Oh,
look what it turned into.
It sure is.
You need to be more aware.
Yeah, you need to be aware that all of these supposedly harmless boys, there's some harm.
There can be things harbored in there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There can be crazy
They're not all like that. I'm the mom of four. I don't want to put that on everyone. Mine are great. But just saying.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, man. Fiction pick.
Hit me with it.
I've got a book from Patricia Lockwood.
Oh.
That just came out. It's called No One Is Talking About This.
Yes. It's on my list. No, but I'm like, I've been waiting. I'm so excited.
This is something.
Is it? Okay.
So the premise of this is that the narrator has achieved a sort of fame through social media posts on something called the Portal, which I think we can safely assume is Twitter, but also maybe all of the social media stuff together.
Right. Okay.
So she's created some posts that were, funny and weird and ironic, and they went viral. Mm. So now she's traveling the world, meeting her fans and speaking about social media. But that's only sort of in the background because the book is such an interesting structure. There's little thoughts, little moments presented as you might see social media posts. Just like a short paragraph here, a couple bullet points here. Oh. Like it's very much like you're reading a Twitter feed.
Yeah.
Really. There's like offhand thoughts. There's like, strident demands for change. There's like self-promotion all together in this weird feed. And the effect is, I think, as you're reading it, it's like if you're if you might get addicted to Twitter or other social, like catching bits of overheard conversations, or zooming into a crowd and getting like little mini hits of their conversation. It's this sort of unrelenting presence, which is really cool. It's something how she's managed to do this. And I think that she's talking about the stuff that everyone is talking about, with these little hits and stuff, is often very important. Like there's a little paragraph about climate change. There's a little paragraph about a dictator, But does it stand out amongst all the other thoughts? I mean, when we've got like a dog video here and then we've got like something about, oh shit, we have a dictator, like that, that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
So the narrator, she's like trying to catch the thread, and she's trying to catch like what's going on this hour, what's going on this minute, what's going on this day. And it just keeps constantly changing. And she's trying to like calibrate and recalibrate. And it just seems so chaotic. But then, in the midst of this virtual sort of crowd, she gets a couple texts from her mom. And her mom says something is wrong and the narrator needs to come home. And the second half of the book, the narrator goes home to be with her sister, who's having a baby. And the baby has Proteus syndrome, which is a condition that causes an overgrowth of skin and bone. And it means the child will likely die soon after she's born.
Oh.
So then we get this crazy collision of like real world, crazy emergency situation and all this, real sadness and horror. And then over here in the portal where it's all this other stuff, like it's some of the same things, but it's sort of separate at the same time.
Yeah.
So I chose it for this theme because obviously social media, part of our lives. And for a certain amount of time every day, whatever we decide, we spend it in these virtual worlds with just people talking and talking and talking and no one really talking to each other, just talking out into the void.
Yeah.
And to see it sort of laid bare like this, like the way that she does it, it just shows how strange and weird those worlds are. And it's super cringy to me. Like it just feels like as you're reading this, you're getting perspective and you're just like, oh God, that person, oh God, like, so much cringe. Especially when we get to this point where there's like real world scary stuff happening.
Yeah.
And she's every once in a while still trying to like log into the portal and she's just like, I don't know, know? So I think all that said, this is funny. It's relatable. It's super touching. It's even sad. And you leave and you feel this sense of like, all of it, the cringe, the sad, everything, it's all life. And one thing I discovered after reading this is that a lot of the author's real life is in here. This actually happened to her sister, this baby situation. And she herself had achieved a sort of fame online. And so she was sort of trying to figure out, like, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my life? And then suddenly this emergency situation arises. And what does that mean? So this feels very personal because it is.
Wow.
So.
Well, two things stood out to me.
Yeah.
One, I think it's a good example of another kind of definition of cringe, which is that cringe happens because there's like unwritten rules that we don't clue each other in on. And social media to me is like the perfect example of that. Like there's unwritten rules, things you're not supposed to do. And we all cringe when we see someone do it. Yeah. But there's not like a class that tells you don't do that. Like we just all agree that we shouldn't be tagging each other in 10-day long posts where I have to say stuff or whatever it is. You don't need to post every single meal you eat or.
And when someone doesn't pick up on those rules and they're doing all these things, it's cringe.
It's so cringy.
Yeah,
but we've never really actually discussed. It's almost like it's a societal decision that no one ever speaks out.
And they're constantly changing these unwritten rules.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, there's so many times we could look back on a post we did maybe 3 months ago and it's like, oh God.
Why did I do that?
Why did I do that?
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Also, I just want to say what a sucker I am for different formatted books. I love stuff like this.
You're going to like this.
It reminds me a little bit of Amber Tamblyn. And some of those other ones that we've read where it's just like Weather by Jenny Offel.
I was actually, as I was reading this, I was like, I was remembering you talking about Weather and like, Erin's going to like this because of that different format, the way she structures it. Yeah. And I just love how everything that she does is sort of building to this sense that you get if you've been like, scrolling the Twitter feed for a half hour or something where you just kind of like, you emerge out of it almost like from a cloud or something.
Yes.
Like, oh, I have a body. Yeah, like I have a body and I got to go pee and I got to go
Yeah.
eat and I got to do these things.
Or I don't know about you, but sometimes I get wrapped up in something that I didn't even know existed prior to
Yes.
opening Twitter. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, what? What's happening? What's this fight about?
Yeah, like,
and then
what's-
I go into a deep dive and I'm like, I don't even know these people. Why did I spend 20 minutes figuring this out?
Yes. And you get this sort of sense of like, oh, people are angry about something. What do I have to be angry about? I got to get angry and I don't
Yeah.
quite know about what.
Yeah.
And
And you're like, what? No.
yeah. This is weird. This
Yes.
is weird behavior.
It is.
Yeah.
I honestly, I mean, no judgment truly, but I don't know how certain people can spend so much time
Oh my
or
gosh.
tweet as much as they do or get involved as much as they do. I do not have the cognitive space for it. I get burnt out so fast.
For sure.
So fast.
Yeah, I have to, for a while, I think it was maybe around the early days of the pandemic. And then when the Black Lives Matter protests were starting, like I was addicted and
Yeah.
I was looking at social a lot more often. And I had to sort of make a conscious decision of like, this is a lot. This is making my heart race every freaking time I open this. Like, I got to stop.
And I almost had the opposite reaction when something really big is going on, like society whole, like Black Lives Matter, the pandemic, things like that. I get like I want to shut it out because I don't want to see a bunch of stuff that is going to make me mad. And so I just sort of like, no, I'm not dealing with any of that. I'm not going to let any of that in because I'm just going to go to like a horrific, pessimistic, nothing's ever going to be good again place.
Which is a good, like, preservation, method. That's
It
the
is.
owl inside telling you, like,
It is.
hey.
It is.
Hey.
But also, it's probably a skill I need to sharpen a little bit more in terms of being able to see some of that and explain to myself why that's not a problem. You know, like just shutting down in the face of things I don't like isn't necessarily a great skill either. But
No.
Yeah,
But
I know
you
what
got
you're
to balance it.
Yeah.
The owl's trying to tell you, like,
He's trying. That's when he's
trying.
throwing the leather helmet over me and be like, no, not today. Not today.
she cannot handle any
No,
more
I'm
sensory
looking at a
stuff.
reservoir and it's dangerously low. So no, leather hat.
She needs some Tootsie Pops to get to.
And then I'm just, all right, I'm out. Well, this week for fiction, book I just read recently. It was published in March of 2020, so high pandemic release.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Darling Rose Gold by Stephanie Roble.
Ooh.
Yes. And a little bit about the author. She lived in Chicago, but has lived in the UK for the last few years with her husband and her dog. Wait for it. His name is Moose Barkwinkle.
Oh, okay. Moose Barkwinkle.
Uh-huh. I just
I'm just
included
letting
that
because I needed to hear that.
Yeah,
That's
I
why
thought
you
you did.
included it. Yeah, yeah.
And I also think I saw a little kinship with this author with you because she used to write ad copy for several ad agencies.
Oh boy, I've written a lot of ad copy in my days.
I know.
Yep.
So this book, I have to tell you, just grabbed me from the beginning and like held on to me like a mom taking her kid to the bathroom in a restaurant. Like, it was just not going to let me go. I'm not getting away.
You're not seeing this, but she's got a death grip
I
on
got
her
a death
hand.
grip, the hand, and the shoulders like above the body, and they're like kind of walking, but not really. That's what this book did.
Okay.
So it might seem a little familiar at first. A few episodes ago, I recommended Mommy, Dead, and Dearest, which was the story of Gypsy Rose, which you might know just from, it being around. But Gypsy Rose was like in her 20s, and everybody thought she was like 15, and her mom had basically convinced everyone that she was sick.
Is this the Munchausen?
Yeah,
by
Munchausen by proxy
uh-huh.
for years, and shaved her head and did all these things. And it turns out she was perfectly fine. Now,
God.
obviously, there's a huge level of emotional and mental abuse, so fine is kind of relative.
Yeah.
But that's how this story starts. So we meet Rose Gold Watts. And she believed for the first 18 years of her life that she was deathly ill and could not have a normal childhood because of it. Her mom told her that her dad died of a drug overdose. It's always just been her and her mom. It seemed like every time something good was about to happen, an illness, a disease, she'd get sick. And the doctors could never quite figure it out. So her mom was always taking her to a different doctor because she's like, we got to figure out what's going on with you. And that all seemed normal to you. But when the book opens up, we find out that her mother, Patty Watts, is soon to be released from jail because when Rose Gold turned 19, she realized that something wasn't right. And she ended up going to the authorities, and her mom got 5 years in jail for child endangerment and fraud. So to everyone's surprise, when Patty's released, Rose Gold takes her in and says, you can live with me, just getting out of jail. Rose
my
Gold,
gosh.
who's now 23 and has been on her own for 5 years. So real quick as the reader, you have no idea who's scamming who or who's telling the truth or what exactly is going on, because we see it goes back and forth from present day Rose Gold and Patty living together to back to childhood, back to Rose Gold in the 5 years she was on her own and how she had to kind of relearn everything she thought she knew about the world and how naive she was about things and how she did learn all of those things. I picked it for this because there were so many times in this book that I went, because as she was trying to assimilate to the world around her she didn't know, she was just making so many faux pas because no one ever taught her. One in particular, she finds out that her dad is in fact not dead, that he didn't die of a drug overdose, the mom basically just cut him out and didn't tell where he was, but he had been paying child support this whole time. So he finds her because, of course, this is national news when she gets put in jail. And her trying to relate to her dad, and her dad has a family of young children and a wife. There were so many cringy moments because she's supposed to be an adult with the capacity to understand things, but she isn't really.
Yeah.
And so some of the stuff that she says or kind of the games she plays to like get affection, so cringy, but really page turning at the same time.
Man.
So I'm telling you what, this book takes you in a million different directions. You have no idea where it's going. I didn't. The ending blew my mind, and I'm here for it. I would read everything by her. It was so good. And, at first I was like, okay, this is very familiar. This sounds like it's following. And then it just went a whole new direction.
Ooh.
And I loved every second of it.
Wow.
Really good.
So even though there were some majorly cringy moments, it kept you
So
turning
cringy.
pages. Like, how does she do that?
Yeah, it's amazing because you're like, oh my gosh. But then you also have to know, how does the person respond to that? Or how does she come back from that? Or,
Yeah.
It's really good. And she does an amazing job of getting in both of these characters' heads because you're very much in Rose Gold's head and Patty. Like, you're getting their viewpoints back and forth, and being able to write those two very different characters. It's very well done, very interesting. Like I said, it was propulsive, and I could not put it down. It was so good.
That's one of the things that I love about doing this podcast is that I don't think before we were doing this, I would have thought of it in this way, that books, the cringe factor in books and how that helps you turn pages, or that we could have developed an entire episode where we're talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I love that we can just focus in on little bits of what makes books amazing.
Yes. Was your owl getting ahead of you?
My
there?
owl's getting ahead of me. My owl was putting the blinders on.
He was, and too early.
And I got confused.
You had a good point. Settle down, owl. I agree. And I love that there's so many times that there's books that I've never heard of that you bring up, or books that we've both heard of and one of us read and said, yeah, you need to.
Same.
Yeah.
Like before, just thinking about who's coming to the book fest, like Tara Jenkins Reid, I'd never heard of her before you brought Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And then suddenly I was like, oh, first off, she's everywhere. I don't know why I hadn't heard of her.
Well, she wasn't though prior to that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was relatively new. But yeah, you've turned me on to so many people that I never had read before.
Yeah. And same, vice versa.
Yeah.
So many good things.
Of course, it makes our reading piles
Difficult.
dangerous and difficult.
It does.
Yeah.
It makes it very difficult.
And while I'm reading, sometimes my owl is like, are you really enjoying this? Because if you're not, cut it loose.
I know. We've talked about that. Yeah. And I had to readapt that skill because it wasn't a skill I had. And then I developed it. And then I felt like it was getting out of control. And so then I was like, okay, are you not enjoying this, or are you not enjoying this right now? Is this just not meeting you where you are?
Yes.
Because we've talked about that. Like, we have a huge TBR pile. Sometimes the book that I just bought is not the book that I read next. I want something else. Or I'm like, oh, you know what? This is the perfect time to read X, Y, or Z. And that's okay too.
And that's what I love about all the holds at the library, because by the time they come to me, sometimes I'm not really interested anymore, but sometimes there's something where I wasn't quite sure and it's hitting me good at that moment.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. I agree. The same. Yeah, you're like, oh no, I'm past that now.
So moral of the story is this podcast is great.
It's personally so fulfilling, and it's just icing that we have listeners.
I mean, again, we've been preparing for this our whole lives.
Our whole lives.
It makes reading even more enjoyable, knowing we get to talk about it. to you listeners.
So take that, director of Sound and Music. I found my own stage and my own voice.
I wasn't ready at age 8, but I'm ready now.
You know what? I didn't want to be a Von Trapp. I wanted to be my own Von Trapp.
I don't know how to segue from the Von Trapps to this book, so I'm just going to make a hard turn.
Hard turn.
And go to other genre books.
Yes.
And the book that I picked is called Mediocre, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America.
Oh, I remember when you were reading this.
Oh boy, this is from Ijama Oluo. This came out last year in 2020. And I learned while I was sort of reminding myself this week about this book, like where this came from. I read an article where I found out like where this idea came from. When Ijama was at a writing retreat with other women, they did their work during the day and then they gathered together every night to talk about their work. And they found themselves talking a lot about men. And here's a quote that she says. We talked about the white men in publishing who are constantly devaluing our work. We talked about the male writers who would grab your ass at book fairs or offer to give you feedback on your work and then try to sleep with you. We talked about how much time we had spent writing about shitty white dudes. Because if we weren't writing about the president, we were writing about how men without uteruses should not control our reproductive choices, or about how rapists should actually go to jail for rape, even if they were gifted athletes. First off, hell of a paragraph.
Yeah.
And it's so accurate because I immediately placed myself, anytime you and I are getting together, anytime we talk to really anybody, there's always some story about a shitty white dude.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So in the years since Trump was elected, Ijama saw, this sort of trend, they were always talking about this, coupled with this sort of growth in white male rage, all these new and riots and online and everything. So she wrote this book, which digs into some of our central American stories and how a lot of times they're all bluster, they're all lies, hiding some pretty mediocre men, and how that's a legacy that's still with us today. And that mediocrity turns into systems that men then protect. So here's some examples. William Buffalo Bill Cody. We may sort of vaguely remember him as like a showman from the 1800s, right? He made a whole reputation for himself as a soldier and like this righteous man. He actually was just an asshole who was hunting indigenous people for sport and killing a lot of buffaloes. And he turned this into a whole thing about how he was this decorated war hero, blah, blah, blah. No, none of that. In modern times, there's Bernie Bros. Oh. The men who proclaim, their liberal sort of cred, and they're talking over and physically silencing other women, other people of color. There's the story of the leadership at Yahoo, where, and this is one like many other stories that Ijama sort of noticed, where failing corporations hand the reins to a woman so they can sort of be like, look at us, we did this. But it's right before the company falls, and then they can then blame the woman after that. Which after she put that out, I was like, oh my God, that happens all the time. That's right.
Oh. And think about the decision that woman has to make. Like, this is a great, technically on the face, a great opportunity. Awesome. You want to take it as advancement, but you also know, I'm being set up.
Yeah. And she gets into it, like some of these people, for sure, they had to balance that. Like, do I do this and maybe take the blame for this? But I'm also sort of shattering a glass ceiling and there's her own
shattering
story.
a glass ceiling and then getting blamed for making a mess. That's what's happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you shattered it and then I cut my foot and now I'm pissed. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also Ijama's own story where she talks about race and gender online, and she has been doxxed and swatted. And if I remember right, doxxed is where they publish your very personal information online. Swatted is when they actually send a police SWAT unit to your house on the claim of some violence being gone. Also, she has just email folders full of hate mail that she's labeled fan mail, which I think is pretty great.
Yeah.
So there's so many stories like this in history right now that you're going to recognize. There's stuff about football. There's stuff about the church. There is a lot of really interesting things, a lot of trends you're going to recognize and understand as part of this legacy that continually protects itself and hurts everyone else in the process. And the reason I chose it for this theme is I think so many white men are just straight up cringe. And there's not a lot that they're doing to dissuade that. I say that because we are obviously women. We, have heard stories of women of color or any person that's not a white, straight male with stories like this, where they're coming up against this, just straight up mediocrity that is being protected, where we're having to fight harder to get into the same spaces or to get the same recognition or all of that kind of stuff.
For sure.
We see a lot of dudes with bluster that's not hiding a lot of talent, but they're in power. And what I like about this book in particular is it's showing the pattern as part of other things we've been talking about, like white supremacy, systemic sexism, rape culture. And Ijama has a quote about what she wanted this book to be for. And she says, "I want everyone who reads this book to see that we aren't just talking about a few bad dudes. We're talking about deliberately constructed identities and systems of power." And I really enjoyed that, this was all sort of tied into those bigger systems while giving us plenty of cringeworthy moments where we read it and think, ugh, you're the worst. And ugh, I know so many dudes like that.
Yeah.
I mean, not so much anymore. I don't hang out with a lot of straight white dudes.
Right, yeah.
But, worked with a lot of them in the past. So, terrific book. Plenty of historical and current cringe.
Yes.
That helps you realize kind of why we're in the mess that we're in.
And what a very true definition of cringe.
But the thing about the women leaders in particular, that stuck with me because I hadn't thought about that as a pattern necessarily until she started pointing it out.
That's awful. I mean, you're right. I hadn't thought of that either. And then when you think about it and you think about what a problem that had to be for them to decide and how unfair it is to make that the way that you earn your promotion.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Also, I just love that she named it mediocre.
Yeah, it's a great word for it. Yeah. Well, my other genre pick this week is a collection of short stories that was just published in September of 2020 by Disha Filia called The Secret Lives of Church Ladies.
Ooh.
And like I said, collection of short stories. One thing I wanted to say about this author, I didn't know much about her, so I did some reading after I read the book and knew that I was going to recommend it. Her writing on race, gender, culture, and parenting have appeared in McSweeney's, The Washington Post, New York Times, like all the big ones.
Yeah.
With obviously good reason, because she and her ex-husband wrote this book together. Co-Parenting 101, Helping Your Kids Thrive in Two Households After Divorce.
Wow.
Like, to be able to write that with your ex-husband.
Holy shit.
Like, automatically, I think she must be amazing.
Yeah.
So, this is a collection of short stories dealing with Black women and particularly Black women in the church. So the stories all have different formats, different points of view. Sometimes there's some common characters that pull through. But it's really a lot about the secrets that we keep from others and from ourselves, and how much we're willing to put on the line sometimes for religion or the idea of Christianity or the idea of the appearance of what we're supposed to be. So a few of my favorites, there's one called Dear Sister, which is formatted like a letter to a sister from a sister that she doesn't know she has because their dad has died.
Oh.
And so it's kind of outing this whole and giving them the background of the family, and it's flows like a letter, but it's also so full of information. Very cool. Another one is there's a grandmother raising her granddaughter, and the voice of the granddaughter is portrayed through the grandma reading her diary, finding her diary in her room and reading it, which is huge violation.
Oh, but that's a big cringe right there. Yeah.
So cringy.
Oh.
But my all-time favorite in the book is the short story called Instructions for Married Christian Husbands.
Oh.
And the female narrator lays out the rules in a very organized and succinct manner for entering into an affair with her. And she has some rules and some things that are going to happen and some things that are not going to happen. And it is cringy at some points and amazing.
Oh, so amazing.
And it's
yeah.
so amazing. And so I picked it for this theme because there's, like we pointed out already, some very cringy moments, which I think I decided as I was doing some of this prep happens when there's a certain level of vulnerability.
Ooh.
When someone's putting themselves, I think that's why we always feel cringy for someone else, because we know that there's a certain level of confidence that you had to take to do whatever we're watching.
Oh man, that's a good point.
And we're realizing, oh, maybe you shouldn't have had that
Yeah,
confidence.
you overshot right there. Yeah,
or this
yeah.
was maybe not the time to be vulnerable.
Yes.
So
Ooh, that's such a great way of putting it. Yeah. And maybe that's why we feel such cringe, because we're understanding their vulnerability. Like, because we've been vulnerable so many times. And we're like, oh God, I know what's going to happen. And,
because we sense that there's an actual hurt that's going to happen there because of that. And I think that happens especially with people who are new to it. Like, if you're not used to being vulnerable, if you're not used to sharing emotions, that sometimes that stuff comes out in a weird, awkward, cringy way. It doesn't always come out in the nice package that we expect. And I, particularly when I was thinking about this, there was one story in here called Peach Cobbler, and there's this really raw conversation with mother and daughter, and they're both have amazing perspective and really good points, but they're just not communicating effectively with each other. But as a sort of outside observer, you can see what's happening. You can see what they're trying to say. It's just not there yet. And it's cringy because you want it to be better for them. And you know that their relationship could benefit from it being better, but you also know that neither of them are in a place to do that.
Yeah.
So it's cringy. You get that cringy feeling, but you also know, okay, maybe it could work out. They'll get better at it and it'll get better. But it was really good. I enjoyed it. It's shorter, so you can get through it really quickly, but I thought it was great.
That's awesome. And that reminds me, like you saying the last story about conversation and dialogue and that being a sort of cringe thing on its own. I have such memories of reading or seeing conversations and dialogue where there is such cringe because you're like, oh, that's the exact worst thing to say in this moment.
Yes.
But then also placing myself there and remembering times where I've had vulnerability and I don't like it and I say something real stupid.
Yes.
And it's like, oh God, yes.
Yeah. Cringy sometimes because you're just trying to close off instead of just, following the moment through. So cringy can come out of shame and embarrassment, but it can also come out of fear of being rejected.
Yeah.
Like I'm vulnerable here and that's uncomfortable, so I'm going to reject you before you reject me.
Mm-hmm. I was also thinking, then there's just straight up like oblivious cringe.
Well, yeah.
Where, do you remember the SNL with Regina King? And there was a sketch where she was like on a dating show.
Yes.
And it was like, who's the cringiest? Like she was turned on by cringe. And so these three dudes then exhibited this amazing cringe.
Yeah.
And it was so bad.
Well, and their personalities could have been right out of your second pick.
Yes.
Mediocre. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a great one. I loved that. Yeah. Very true.
Well, thinking about, conversations and especially those around vulnerability, I think that's where my pop culture pick comes in. And it's a show from HBO Max, Erin.
What?
Came out last year before we knew what HBO Max really was, before we became evangelical about HBO Max. The show's called Love Life. It has Anna Kendrick.
Yeah.
And she plays a woman named Darby. And we follow her for almost 10 years as she enters the real world out of college. And Darby, she's an adult now. She just wants to be loved, just like most other people. She has the desire, like a lot of us, wants to find the person that's going to be our person, that's going to support us and love us and make us better. And again, that's a lot to ask of a person. Mm-hmm. And she's going to find that the people that you think are the people, they're not the people kind of thing. She doesn't have the owl really telling her the right things.
She hasn't honed the owl, trained it well yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in real life, it's real hard to find such a person and to learn from and recognize mistakes that will help you find if that person is the person. Mm-hmm. So each episode is about a significant other in her life. Like the first episode's about her first real love, which ends in part because they're young, they're right out of college, and they're seeking job opportunities that are going to take them away from each other. Then there's an episode about an older man that she works with. It also focuses on other key relationships in her life, like her mom and her best friend. And along the way, she's building a career in art curation, from some grunt jobs in galleries to a museum to her own business. So at first, I think when I first saw this and I saw Anna Kendrick, I was like, this is going to be pretty light viewing. It's going to be like, pretty funny and everything. And it is. It's funny. It's sweet. It's compelling. It's kind of like a romantic comedy set up in a way. But then it really gets into the hard work of becoming a person and learning about what relationships are good and what relationships are bad. And that can be really hard as an adult. Figuring out what you want, figuring out what you don't want. Coming up against some of the darker forces in your own psyche and those in the people around you. I saw a lot of really familiar pain in here, you know, from like choosing the wrong people to just learning how to be a person, along with so many cringy moments of becoming an adult. And that's why I chose it here, because I think a lot of us can look back at our 20s in particular and just cringe. Like I feel my body seizing up, like my arms just kind of go into my chest and like, oh God.
Yeah.
Oh God. So many mistakes. So many embarrassments, so many regrets. And she has so many of them, as do some of the people around her in her life. But what I like is here, you know, it's all there. And as a viewer, we can see some of the lessons that she's learning and we can see them coming. But in the midst of it, you know, you're just living and she's just living. And that's what Darby's doing, just trying to make some sense out of all the cringe and to move forward. I think it's a really satisfying watch. And I got a lot more respect for Anna Kendrick. I've liked her in many things, but here you see her doing a lot of stuff you haven't necessarily seen in other movies.
Yeah.
Also, good news, there's another season coming, not about Darby. It's about someone new.
Oh.
And the someone new is William Jackson Harper from The Good Place.
Oh.
So that should be kind of interesting to see where that goes. So almost, it kind of sounds like it's going to be like an anthology series, you know, with like new characters going forward. But,
I like that.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. I've seen that a couple times and I haven't dived in, but I will.
Go for it.
Which I know is shocking because it's on HBO Max.
Well, there's just so much on HBO Max, Erin.
I know.
Why don't you get in all your messaging here that you want to, you know, get paid for?
I don't know what else to say. I mean, I think that I have clearly and concisely and succinctly explained how in love I am with HBO Max. And either you want this or you don't. And I think continuing to chase you is starting to get cringy, HBO Max. And I need you to give me some sign because the owl's about to pull the curtain on this.
Yeah, the owl's about to be like, stick a Tootsie Pop in that and stop
we're
it.
Done talking about it.
Yeah.
We're not, but it is what it is. Well, I actually picked something this week from Netflix.
What?
So, I know.
Is the love affair over?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just trying to pretend that it's, you know, taking a back seat.
Okay.
This is called How to Fix a Drug Scandal.
Whoa.
Yes. And this is a 4-part documentary on Netflix by Erin Lee Carr, who produced The Mommy, Dead, and Dearest, among others. She's kind of an up-and-coming documentary filmmaker, but has a lot of accolades and for good reason. So this details the story of Massachusetts, who in a very short time was rocked by 2 separate drug lab scandals. So a drug lab, I wasn't familiar with this entirely. So when someone's arrested and has possession of whatever drugs that are illegal, those drugs have to be sent to a drug lab with a certified chemist to test and make sure that they are, in fact, an illegal substance. Because obviously they couldn't make a possession charge stick if it was baking soda or, you know, something else.
Yeah.
Even if they've admitted that it was illegal substance, they still need to verify that it was. So, and I didn't realize that this is a job that people have. But in Massachusetts, they had 2 scandals. One, in this lab, they have a chemist who's addicted to drugs. And so
that's going to color your view.
Performing her job while high and then ends up getting caught because she's stealing the drugs and replacing
they're
them
just there
with fake drugs.
Oh.
Which is a problem because now the evidence bags are messed up, right? Because now in cases where she said that there was illegal substances, which they're, by her test, there were. Now, whether or not that can be verified because she was high. But now when they go back, they're not positive because she took the drugs out. Okay. The other has a chemist who's just addicted to success, is like, I'm going to be the best at this. And so basically just forged a whole bunch. She was doing like 4 times the work of any other chemist.
Why does it have to be women? Come on, man.
Yeah. So Sonia Farrick is the one that was addicted, and Annie Ducan was the one that was just forging things. But essentially both left thousands of people's cases and futures up in the air.
Oh my God.
Because you have people that were either sentenced based on these things, especially in Annie Ducan's case where they weren't even tested. Now, there's a little bit ease with her because you could go back and test it. She didn't tamper with the evidence like Sonia Farrick did. But there is so many cringy moments in this. It's kind of about like what does the prosecutor's office do? What does the attorney general do? How do they fix this? And they go about it in some very weird ways that you're going to be like, why was that the route that you chose? But there's some moments that really made me cringe where they gave Sonia, the one that was addicted to drugs, kind of a deal to be in front of a grand jury and explain everything, like how she did it, kind of with immunity, so that they could get all the information and figure out how much stuff was actually tainted. Because the attorney general tried to sell it that it was just within the last couple months that she developed an addiction.
It wasn't.
No.
No.
And the attorney general went as far as to hide some evidence from the defense attorney who had a bunch of clients who went through this lab, and he was trying to figure out how bad this was, right? So he's supposed to have that evidence, and he wasn't given it because basically Sonia Farrick was addicted before she started. Oh. So the attorney general knew this was a problem because, one, where's the drug testing for your employees? Two, where's the oversight for your employees? Mm-hmm. So many questions. And they found stuff in her car, like of her on her own independently trying to get drug abuse help. So they found like journal type stuff in her car.
Oh, God.
And her on the stand having to explain these things, just so cringy. And so cringy when you think about some of these people making these decisions and thinking, oh, nothing's going to come of this. They're never going to find this out. I'll just say that it was just a couple months. So many moments. It's really well done. The interviews are really interesting. It's a really interesting look at the justice system, especially in terms of drug convictions and drug cases. They get a little bit into sentencing and sentencing discrepancies, like at the same time that Sonia Farrick was sentenced, which, spoiler alert, she got 18 months.
Oh my God.
There was a man whose lab was done by her, so they're not even sure it was legitimate, who got 7 years for basically 2 teaspoons of heroin is what it amounted to.
That's what I keep thinking of is we know now, like how, I mean, a lot of people have known this for a long time, but like how unfair drug sentencing is. Yes. And add to it that incompetence and like just straight up lying.
Yeah.
That's people's lives you're messing with.
The other part that was super cringy was that this Annie Ducan was also really ruining any thought that she was biased, because she was very much trying to work with prosecutors. Like, she had very good relationships, which was proven by her email, which is weird. They're supposed to be a neutral chemist in a lab. And there's some where she was clearly trying to flirt with one of them, and it was landing real weird, and it was so cringy.
Oh my God.
It was just, it's so interesting. Like I said, it's 4 parts. Each part's like an hour. You just kind of can't believe that it happened. I didn't remember hearing anything about it. Mike said he thought that he did hear something about it.
It sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't.
Yeah,
I didn't know the details.
And they happened within like months of each other. And one was like in kind of like East and West is how it was. Like the East Massachusetts area, West Massachusetts, but they were both dealing with this kind of same breakdown of their whole system.
Well, then you start to question like what's happening in other drug labs in other states, in other areas. Like there's got to be more stories like this that we're just not aware of yet.
Yeah, and I thought that too, but then you do get a little bit of a sense of almost relief, because they're talking to other people and being like, why is the lab running like that? I mean, there's a little bit of shock that there weren't certain things in place, that this isn't the way. And it's funny, that doesn't come up until later in one of the episodes, but in the first episode, they were showing the inside of this lab, and I was like, why does it look like that? How can that even be? Like, before I even knew there was a scandal, I'm like, why would you test anything there? That doesn't seem so. And then later you find out, none of this was really, but you also find out that the state holds some responsibility. They were super underfunded, but then also just put upon to do all these tests all the time. They were trying to do like 4 times what they should have been doing with like half of the funding they should have had. And so what do you expect is going to go by the wayside, you know? So lots of things to think about. A lot of cringy stuff.
That's the epitome of cringe.
So much cringe.
That is really destructive. You know, we talked about like cringe that just hurts you.
Yeah.
Or just hurts, like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a widespread cringe.
It's a really bad cringe.
That's like cringe. Vanilla Ice level cringe.
Yeah.
Which is epic cringe.
the most cringy thing I think about Vanilla Ice whenever I think about him is that MTV interview where he's like, mine goes dun 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 dun.
This is the one where he's trying to differentiate his song,
From-
which he ripped off from Queen and Bowie.
And his argument is dun 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 dun.
Yeah, nobody.
Which means nothing.
No, it means
it's not
nothing.
notes. It's just nonsense words. It's not actually a defense. It's just you sort of humming.
Was he
And
trying to defend? Like, was he getting hit with fines? Is that why?
I don't remember. I think
don't
so.
either.
At first, I think it was just people were saying like you ripped this off, and
Yeah.
he was coming out. Because then I think after that, it just went straight into he wasn't saying anything anymore.
Yeah.
Probably because his PR team was like,
shut it
"Please,
down. Stop
please
it."
Do not do dun 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 dunce. We talked about this. That is not a defense. You can't just go dun dun. It doesn't work.
And also, you're not at Queen and Bowie levels, so just slow it down. Just stop it.
Pump the brakes.
Yeah.
Pump the brakes.
Ugh.
Drop the mic like a vandal. Pump the brakes.
All right, stop and collaborate and listen.
And
I
obviously you
suspect.
weren't collaborating.
No, you weren't.
You were just taking and
You were just
listening.
taking. Oh boy, do you
Really?
think the youths even know that song?
I know Evan does because
Does
I
he?
played it for him.
Oh boy, what did Evan, you 14-year-old?
It was a while ago that I played it for
Oh.
him, and I introduced him to it, and he was nonplussed.
I mean, that's the right reaction.
Yeah, I mean, it's valid.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got good instincts, I think. That was a test you passed. I mean, I sang the whole thing in the car, but that's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Oh boy.
I would like to admit that I did something that was super cringy
Ooh.
as a ride or die, today.
What was it?
which is something I meant to do at the beginning.
What?
And now I have to do it now because I'm so cringy. Your book is out for pre-order, and I didn't say a word at the beginning of this episode. I was so excited to talk about cringies that I didn't even talk about that.
Yeah, and hopefully my book coming out is not cringy, so it's
Well,
just
no,
like,
of course
yeah,
it's not cringy,
yeah.
but it's out for pre-order, which means you
is.
can order it.
You sure can.
Which means you can put in Yo's credit card hot digits and know that a book is coming.
You're damn right it is.
It's a real thing.
And it's a good thing you brought that up because this week you texted me, you're like, you have a book coming out. And I was like, I'm in a weird headspace right now. I'm not really getting it. Like, I feel weird. And you're like, if you were a mediocre man, you would be excited about this. I'm like, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
So this week I was really channeling a mediocre man and being like,
I'm
I got to
glad.
pump this up.
I'm glad. And
Yeah.
I don't mean that like that's the level you're on.
No,
You're
no,
far
no.
above.
No.
I just mean that level of confidence you need to be taken in.
Like direct messaging,
Yes.
people on Twitter and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, about that.
Yep.
And clearly never listening to our show.
Never
just
listening to
thinking
our
that we
show.
would be
Just
receptive
saying, like,
to-
hey, you need to talk about my book.
Can I come on and talk about my book
Yeah.
that
Not that happened.
it might be like a pamphlet is what I thought it looked like, but I mean, whatevs. You do you.
Maybe that shows that we're at a stage
Mm-hmm.
in our,
Yeah.
fame, you might call it. Another stage in our fame next week. We are at the book festival live.
Virtual live.
And, as we've said before, show up in your PJs.
Do it.
Drink a cup of coffee.
Do it.
We got special announcements coming. We
Do
got
it.
all sorts of stuff.
Yes.
So join us.
Join us.
Yeah.
In the meantime,
Happy reading.